Let's talk about the idea that is quite a paradox. Probably one of the most central paradoxes to all things spiritual, possibly even religious, but in the reality game that we play, it's important to put these things in the right framework and not get caught up in terms and phrases and words too much, because a lot of these words are quite loaded with all sorts of psychological, emotional, and even political, ideological energies. And they mean something different to each and every one of us. I'm talking about the idea of God or creator or source or consciousness, the universe. There's so many words and ideas. And of course, these are Western terms. There's other Eastern ideas based out of those central belief systems and paradigms in the Muslim world, in the Hindu world, in Chinese philosophies and Japanese philosophies, Russian. All of them have different expressions for what is essentially the same thing. So let's not get caught up on any particular term, because the principle of the thing is what we're trying to get to. The idea, the principle I'd like to speak about is that God will work with you, not for you. And if that's not the most complex and divisive idea or paradox of our time, I'm not sure what is. Of course, at first, a lot of this comes down to a definitions issue. How do we define God? What is God? In the simplest terms, it's kind of the over soul, the overarching, the dominant force of creation, the foundational substance, the essence of our reality, our realm, how we are even allowed to exist in the first place. There's this all-encompassing, all that is sort of notion about it, and it's beyond words to really describe it, right? Obviously, in this, therein lies the problem. But when we're talking about foundational principle ideas, we have to understand that the concept of God working with us, not for us, is foundational to how our reality works. And when we can appreciate, perhaps, that God is within, what is within us, the soul, our creation spark, our individuation, our othering of God, the fragmentation, that separation that creates this duality and this necessary separation or disparateness from all that is, from God, from source, from the universe, that allows us to express in this human individuation, that allows us to experience this earth life, this earthbound kind of experience. That's what I'm speaking to. By extension is the idea of, heaven, and that ethereal, ephemeral kind of concept, the substance that sustains us, that allows all of this reality to be perceived and constructed in the first place. It's that quantum field, if you want to call it that, the source field energy, the informational field that essentially collapses down thought into this materium, this physicality, this physical experience, so that we can experience again who we are, what we are as a human, as an individuation, as a soul, separate from the oversoul, God, creator, whatever you want to call it. So the problem, of course, in our reality and in modern history is that the idea of God has been externalized. The authority, like everything else, has been inverted. The creation story, the creation idea, the co-creatorship, the authorship has been deferred to something outside of us, something greater, something bigger, something all-powerful. And that inversion, of course, has dissociated us from that which we well and truly are, which is, of course, God, an aspect of that all, a fractal of the fractal, a piece of that source, the original, the foundation of this entire realm and what we perceive as reality. and what is beyond, of course, the physical. So for us to be empowered as an individual to understand our agency and our authority in this place and in this life, and to be empowered and to reclaim that agency, as I speak about often, we have to bring it all home, bring it all back to center, bring it all back together, to defragment ourselves, as it were, to pull all of our fragmented pieces that have been dissociated and thrown out into all aspects of society and across time and the past and the present and the future. We're, borderline schizophrenic because we're so fragmented and atomized and spread all over the place with our consciousness and our focus and our energies. So in order to reclaim that agency, we have to be able to sit in that silence and allow all of our disparate pieces to come back home, come back to center, and to realize that all of that knowledge and wisdom and power is actually only ever possible as an emergence from within, because the source, that spark, is within us. And you could physically probably locate that in the heart center, right? That is essentially where heaven would exist. That is where that portal to the greater all that is, that access point that we have is. So in its most simple form, once we've returned home and re-centered ourselves and learned to listen to our soul, to that still small voice within, and now God can work with us, through us, because that inversion of putting God out there as something that's, up in heaven and is going to be coming down in some sort of flaming chariot to save us, blah, 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 is nonsensical, because we don't need saviors. We never did. That was part of the lie, of course. You're deferring your power, and because you were convinced from an early age and programmed with conditions and rules, the stupidity of original sin, and that you were born broken and incomplete and lacking, and the lie that you've, been separated to such an extent that you need to forgive and pray for forgiveness and to go through some sort of ridiculous ritual wherein you will be brought home and allowed back into the kingdom. All of this kind of nonsense that has been beaten into the heads of generations of men and women, that only perpetuates the separation and the distortion and illusions and disempowerment of the individual. So if we can get past all that crap and get back to what is actually real and true and authentic, what has always been, what you were born with and as, the soul, your individual spark, what you are, that fragmentation, that fractal of God, as we're speaking of, that piece of source that allows itself to experience and know itself. The whole point of your existence in the first place is not broken, incomplete, or sinful. So drop that horse shit and reclaim your agency and bring it back to your heart center and bring it back to yourself, understanding that you are not incomplete, you are not broken, that you are essentially the immortal within, as we've said several times now throughout some of these videos. And once you awaken to that, which reminds me of Jason Breshear's book called Awaken the Immortal Within. You can listen to it on YouTube for free or support his work, buy it on Amazon. It's a short book, but it could help you reframe some of these ideas. It's not an original idea. It's not something that hasn't been brought up hundreds of thousands of times by very wise and understanding people throughout all of recorded history and time. So the first step is to remember who and what you are. And what does that even mean? Well, you can't do that if you're projecting and deferring your authority and your autonomy onto some other thing, that you have to get permission to reclaim that agency and that creatorship and that authorship from something or someone else outside of you, some sort of vessel or some conduit that can interpret the ideations and the wishes and demands of God so that you can have permission to enter the kingdom. I mean, give me a break. Let's put on some adult pants here and assume some sort of spiritual maturity, for crying out loud. I think we're well past the point of entertaining these nonsensical and childish notions wherein you have to ask some other man or woman or entity or institution for permission to know God. I mean, for fuck's sake, could there be anything more stupid? And I'm passionate about this because this is one of the biggest lies that's perpetuated throughout human history. We're going on millennia here, and this nonsense is still proliferated throughout the world. And you look at garbage like this Pope character and all that, the Vatican, all that institution represents, and the flat out lies and ridiculousness that this whole institution represents, never mind being one of the wealthiest sort of entities that has, more money than God, as not to put too fine a point on it. They don't represent God or what is real and true about spirituality. So let's just state that as fact. What's true and the only way to God is through you. It's already there. You were born with it. It is the fundament of your existence. You wouldn't exist without that spark, that original creator spark, that fractal, that peace, right? So, God will work with you, not for you. That's the truth. That's the simplest way to state that. Because God is you. God is within you. So it can't be outside of you to work for you and be some other thing that's going to just suddenly save you and change your life circumstances from the outside by accident or by fluke or by someone else's wishes. Right? And that's the whole idea of getting rid of this victim mentality and mindset. And on the other side of it is the martyrdom. And these ways that we can trip and fall over our own misguided notions and improperly framed ideas about reality and our purpose. What is authentic, real, and true doesn't require an interpreter. It'll speak to you in your language. It'll speak to you in truth. It'll speak to you in resonance and dispel any of the incongruities that are introduced and these language and word spells and spell casting that exists out in the world to dissuade you and deter you and to keep you away from home, from coming home to understanding that it's always been with you. It is always there in the silence if you just would stop thinking, stop believing, stop attaching yourself to some sort of identity that was constructed for you, given to you, or programmed into you. And that's the whole idea of enlightenment, as I've spoken about and written about. It's about unburdening and dropping the conditions and the rules and the programs. It's not about seeking some sort of higher spiritual state. Once you're unburdened with all the lies, once you have dropped all these blankets of ideas and stories and narratives that are just complete bullshit, you're naturally going to float up to the surface. You will be unburdened and enlightened because that heaviness will simply be gone, dispelled, erased, deleted from existence like it never was in the first place. And you simply return to what is true. You are here. I am. You are. Yes? So the phrase God will work with you, not for you, is not only a paradox, but it is the ultimate truism. I mean, it is literal, factual, because once you understand that it rests solely within, it is always there. It has always been there. You can re-engage with that energy. You can start listening again to your soul, and you can start walking again hand in hand with what never left you in the first place, never had to be attained, never needed permission, never needed someone else to allow you to unlock the doors that you locked yourself in the first place. Put simply, it's between you and your maker, between you and your creator, between you and God. There is no distance. There's no separation. There never was.
Searching through eternity, I consider alternatives. Why is the question never let me go? Seeking out conformity, miss the chance to